Oh, everyone. Welcome, everyone. And thank you for joining us today for this very special WRJ program, the Sephardic Jewish Odyssey from the Ottoman Empire to Seattle. My name is Kenya Newhouse, and I come to you from Miami, Florida. I go by the pronouns she, her, and I am a member of the WRJ Programs Committee and past member of the WRJ Board. Welcome, everyone. We are so excited that more than 230 of you registered to attend this program. Yay, thank you. This is a large group, so we cannot have you introduce yourselves out loud. Please write your name and location in the chat. If you like, include if you've traveled to the Greek islands and maybe your favorite Greek food. I, for one, am a big foodie and I love Greek food. Haven't traveled there, but definitely have it in my bucket list. Once Cynthia starts the presentation, keep your chart comments to a minimum and just let us know of technical issues or important questions. Know that there will be time at the end for Q&A. You will be muted so we can hear Cynthia better, but please, she wants you to leave your video on so she can see your faces and feel your presence with us. So now let me introduce you to today's presenter, Cynthia Flash. She has a fascinating stories to share with us about the Jews from Rhodes, Greece, and the surrounding Ottoman Empire, and their incredible journey to establish the third largest Sephardic community in the United States. Cynthia Flash Hemphill grew up in Seattle, the daughter of Claire Barkley Flash, who helped her large Sephardic family flee the island of Rhodes during World War II. Claire married Philip Flash, and they were among the growing number of couples and families in Seattle who merged Sephardic and Ashkenazic, Orthodox, and Reformed traditions. Cynthia grew up listening to Ladino at home. Along with her husband, Dan Hemphill, and her two sons, she is a member of Temple B'nai Torah in Seattle. With a degree of communications from the University of Washington, Cynthia founded Flash Media in 2000 and works as a journalist and publicist. She's also a published author of a book that's titled A Hug from Afar. I just love that title. It just warms my heart. That is about her mother's escape from Rhodes to the United States during the Holocaust, as told in her letters to her family written in Ladino. It had been quite a project for Cynthia to get these letters translated and compiled into the story she tells in her book. Cynthia has received a number of awards for her extensive work as head of the Seattle Sephardic Network and educating people about this little known piece of Jewish history. After today, I hope more of us will not only learn about the breadth and the depth of our varied Jewish communities around the world and here in the States, but will celebrate in delight in the spirit of thriving beyond survival that defines us as Jews. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming and with great pleasure, let me present to you Cynthia Flash.
Thank you so much. Thank you to WRJ for inviting me to speak to you tonight and for everybody who is attending. Amanda is going to be my technical support here. And so we're going to show some slides with my presentation and she's going to be managing them. So I will just tell her when to forward to the next slide, and hopefully it will go very smoothly. I look forward to accepting questions at the end of the presentation. That will just kind of keep me on track if I wait till the end to receive them. So thank you, Genia, for that lovely introduction. As she mentioned, my mother was a Sephardic Jew and my father Ashkenazic, so I am half and half, but I really identify with the Sephardic side because it, to me, is very interesting. It's a little different. Plus, we just happen to have a lot of information about it. So I'm going to tell you about Seattle's Sephardic community, some of the history, and then I'll get into more about my personal story. And then about the food and music of the Sephardic Jewish community. So Amanda, if you want to advance to the next slide. So the Sephardic Jews were the Jews from Spain. And we were in Spain for many, many centuries. And in 1492, all the Jews of Spain there was an edict from the Queen and the King that basically said, we don't want Jews in our Catholic country. So the Jews of Spain had three choices. They could leave Spain, they could stay in Spain and convert to Catholicism, or they would be killed. So the Sephardic community that survived, they left Spain and they fled throughout the world. Next slide, please. Thank you. This shows some of the Jewish migration from Spain after the expulsion. And you can see that from Spain, the Jews fled north, and they fled east, and they fled south. And the Jews that I'm going to talk about fled mainly to the Ottoman Empire. And bear with me a second here. I'm actually watching the slides on my own computer as well. There we go. Next slide, please. Excellent. Okay. So the Ottoman Empire was basically what today comprises Turkey and Syria and Greece and Bulgaria and that whole area. And so the Jews from Spain traveled in great numbers to that area, and they were very comfortable there for many, many, many years. And they were comfortable not only among themselves, but among their brethren from other religions. And the main religion was the Islamic religion. And at that time, the Jews and the Muslims got along very, very well. Now, when the Ottoman Empire broke up in the early 20th century, different countries took over. And I'm going to tell you about the island of Rhodes, which we see on the map here. So the island of Rhodes, which is the largest Greek island, and it's the largest of the Dodecanese, which is the furthest south of the islands. The island of Rhodes had a significant Jewish population. And I'm talking about the Jews of the Ottoman Empire and Rhodes because they're the ones that ultimately came to Seattle. So they're the ones that I'm very, very familiar with. So Rhodes was part of the Ottoman Empire under Turkish possession until 1912. Now, I'm not going to get into the weeds with all the history, but it's really important to know this little bit of history because there was a war between Turkey and Italy in 1912, and Italy won. Okay, so Rhodes became under Italian possession. It was a very bad time in history for Rhodes and their Jews to be part of Italy. And we will get into that a lot with my family's story later in the presentation. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what it was like for the Jews of Rhodes. And again, I'm focusing on this because this is the history of my own family, and in large part, the history of the Jews from Spain who came to Seattle. All right, so Rhodes, if I was talking to you in person, I would ask you to raise your hand if you've ever been to Rhodes, but I won't be able to see that. So if you've been to Rhodes, you'll know what I'm talking about. Rhodes is one of the most popular tourist spots for cruise ships right now. But before cruise ships became popular, Rhodes was very typical of a Mediterranean island. And there was a large Jewish community there. Up to 5,000 Jews lived there at one time, for centuries, actually. And they lived in an area called La Judaria, which is the Jewish area. It was not necessarily a ghetto, it was just a Jewish neighborhood. And I'm going to just show you a few photos of what it looked like. These photos were taken in the 1930s. The men wore fez. Why did they wear fez? Because Rhodes had been part of the Ottoman Empire, part of Turkey. All right, next slide. Rhodes is known for Mandrake Harbor. This is a picture of Mandrake Harbor. There was the Colossus of Rhodes way back when, one of the 7 wonders of the world. Next slide. This is a Jewish wedding procession. Whenever the community was extremely close, they were not only close in their relationships, but they were close in proximity. The houses were next to each other. The roads and the alleys were very narrow. When one person celebrated a simcha, the entire community celebrated. Here you can see the bride, the novia, and the groom right in the middle of this photograph. And actually, the 2 boys that look very similar on the left, they're twins, and they were my uncles, my twin uncles. All right, next photo, please, or next slide. I want to mention a wonderful book that if anyone is interested in what life was like in Rhodes, there's a book, it was published about 3 years ago called 100 Saturdays, and it is the story of Stella Levy. Stella is 104 years old. She still lives in New York, and this is an absolutely delightful book. I strongly recommend it. All right, next slide, please. So Rhodes today has no existing Jewish community. However, because it's an island and the Jews who no longer live in Rhodes have strong connections there, there is still one synagogue that is in operation part of the year. It's called Kahal Shalom. It's the oldest synagogue in Greece, and there's a picture of it. Now you'll notice that the synagogue looks a little bit different. There is not only a bima at the far end, but there's a teva in the middle. So the services are led from both the bima and the teva, depending on what part of the service they're in. You can also see the separation between the 2 sides, like a traditional synagogue. And by the way, Sephardic Jews don't have Orthodox, conservative, and reform. That does not exist within Sephardic Jewry. Everything is quote unquote traditional, which Ashkenazic Jews would probably consider more Orthodox. So the men and the women sit separately in a Sephardic synagogue, just like in an Ashkenazic synagogue. All right, next slide, please. So let's talk about Seattle's Sephardic community. So Seattle's Sephardic community started in 1902. There were 2 men, and they came to Seattle from Marmara, Turkey. They had some friends, non-Jewish, who had been to Seattle, and they said it reminded me and reminded them a little bit of what it was like in Turkey. And so they suggested to these 2 Jewish men that perhaps they would make their way there. Next slide, please. These 2 men were named Jacob Polakar and Solomon Calvo. And they came to Seattle and they thought it looked fantastic. The weather was mild. We're a seaport. there appeared to be ways that you could make a living by perhaps fishing or selling vegetables, and this was comfortable to them. However, when they came to Seattle, there was a Jewish community here, but it was an Ashkenazic Jewish community. And when Jacob and Solomon got off the boat, they wanted to find other Jews because being Jewish was very important to them. So they got off the boat and they started yelling, Yehudi, Yehudi, Jew in Hebrew. And somebody heard that and they went and talked to them, and they were able somehow to understand that they were Jewish, and they connected them with the rabbi in Seattle, and the rabbi met with them and started speaking to them in Yiddish. Well, these Jews didn't know Yiddish because they never learned it. They spoke Ladino as their native language. And so, and they pulled out a prayer book, a Bible, and they started speaking in Hebrew. But the accent was different. So this rabbi wasn't quite sure, are these really Jews or not? So he wrote a letter back to New York, because there was more Jews and a larger population in New York, and asked, we're meeting these Jews. They speak a different language, but they speak Hebrew, but it has a different accent, and their language sounds like Spanish. Are they Jews? And word came back from New York, yes, in fact, they are Jews. They're Sephardic Jews from Spain. All right, next slide, please. So Jacob and Solomon, over the next roughly 20 years, they sent for other women, family members, and other men from Rhodes to come, from Turkey to come to Seattle. And there became this influx of Jews from Turkey and from Rhodes to Seattle. So there was a lot of Sephardic Jews who came in between 1902 and 1924. And 1924, when Calvin Coolidge was president, they enacted the Immigration Act of 1924. I call it the Anti-Immigration Act of 1924, because what this did was it set up quotas from countries that were anything but very white. So if you were from Scandinavia, you had no trouble immigrating to the United States. But if you were from a country where people had darker skin, and that included the former Ottoman Empire countries and Italy, then you had quotas, and it was very, very difficult to get into the United States. Okay, next slide. So at that point, immigration to Seattle pretty much stopped. Okay, meanwhile, what was happening in Seattle with the Sephardic community? It was a very vibrant Sephardic community, a very vibrant community. And they got involved in one of the areas of work was at Seattle's famous Pike Place Market. So the first Sephardics arrived in Seattle in 1902, and the Pike Place Market opened in 1907. In fact, there were so many Sephardic businesses there at the time that I'll show you another slide in a minute, that they actually were speaking Ladino to each other, the businesses and the members of the community who came through. So, Amanda, if you can click on the sound on this, I want to give you a sense of what it is like at the Pike Place Market today. There are still a few Sephardic businesses. The most famous and the longest one is Pure Food Fish. It's not the fish market where they throw the fish, which you may have heard of. It's a different one. In my opinion, it's the best. And they are now in their 4th generation. And we're going to hear from Isaac Bihar, who's 4th generation, talk a little bit about his business and the history. And Amanda, I have you stop it at 1:45. It's not
an Amen, he's a Bihar.
I'm 4th generation. Yeah, my great-grandpa Jack started Pure Food Fish back in 1911, running away from the Turkish army. Came and ran to America.
We talked about that.
Yeah.
Young Turk Revolution.
Yeah.
Conscription of the Ottoman army. Okay.
We didn't actually start out in this location. We started out across the street, and we had a small stand there until about 1950, when we moved up to the main location up there. And I think in 76, there was a really cool winter and blew a bunch of snow in. And my grandfather was just like, this is the last time I do this up here again. And we moved down here. We've been down here ever since. It's been 107, almost 108 years now.
Wow. Are there many families like yours that are like among the early families that still
Maybe 2 or 3 left.
really?
Yeah, there's the Levy family that has Three Girls Bakery.
Love that place.
Right there. Great.
Wasn't there a Levy fish market further down?
They sold
They sold it. What was it called?
City Fish. It's still,
City Fish.
It's still there.
Still there.
But they
Who,
sold.
who were the Levy brothers that ran that? You remember? Don't know?
Jack is one.
Jack is one, yeah.
Fantastic. So has the kind of fish that you've sold, has it changed over time, or is
It's
it
just a little bit.
Really?
Definitely the prices.
I
No, I find prices every once in a while online, like on Wikipedia. If you search fish or fishmonger, you'll find a picture of one of our guys up there.
Really?
But the prices all say the same. It's like $3.99 a pound. I'm just like, wow.
Yeah,
that was
that's fine.
30 years ago, 40 years ago.
How do you
All right, thank you, Amanda. So this is Isaac Bihar, and his his grandfather's name was Amen. And just to show you how big, how important the Pike Place Market is to the Sephardic Jewish community in Seattle, let's show the next slide.
No, he's not able.
There we go. So Isaac's grandfather, who was second generation, passed away about a year ago. And this is his tombstone in the Sephardic cemetery. It actually has a drawing from the Pike Place Market. So anyone who comes to Seattle and visits the Sephardic cemetery will see this and see this intense connection between the Sephardic community and the Pike Place Market. All right, next slide, please. As I mentioned, they used to speak Ladino to each other at the market. And let's get a very short little sample of what this sounds like. And you can run the whole thing.
Demonstrate, like what would they say?
Chicones, portocales, the names of the fruits and vegetables.
give us a
and how
couple
much they
examples?
cost.
Give us a couple examples.
Los portocales son una docena por 5 centavos.
Dozen oranges for 5 cents. Sounds like a good deal.
A really good deal.
Thank you. Next slide, please.
Demonstrate.
So by the way, the Seattle Sephardic Network runs a tour of Seattle Sephardic history. And it's really fun. We do it in the summer in person. But if anyone wants more information, there actually is the tour that lives digitally at the Washington State Jewish Historical Society website. They just updated their website, and so, but it's there. You just have to poke around a little bit, or you can even Google Seattle Sephardic Tour, and you can get a ton of information. All right, next slide, please. So not only did the Sephardic community play a big part in the Pike Place Market, but of course the Sephardic community set up synagogues here in Seattle. Now, the funny thing is that all the Sephardic Jews in Seattle were part of the Ottoman Empire. They were all part of the same community. And the distance between Rhodes and Turkey is only 12 miles. However, the different communities that came to Seattle tried to hold on to the different pieces of their culture. So the Jews from Turkey started one synagogue, and the Jews from Rhodes started a second synagogue. And then there was a third synagogue way back when that was created by Jews who came from a different part of Turkey. Now, to this, that synagogue didn't last very long, and they ended up merging with the other synagogue with the Jews from Turkey. But to this day, there are still 2 Sephardic synagogues in Seattle. They are about 1.5 miles apart. And one still is the Jews from Rhodes, and the other is the Jews from Turkey. So the one synagogue where the Jews from Turkey started, it's called Sephardic Bikor Holim. Now we call it Sephardic Bikor Holim because there was a Bikor Holim, which was Ashkenazic. And so they both chose the same name. This is the original one. And my aunt and uncle were actually married here. And so this is inside the original Sephardic Bikur Holim. Next slide. That building, now it was sold to a African-American church in the 1960s. And the building is now this African-American Pentecostal church. But it's was designated a couple years ago as a Seattle landmark. And so you can see the outside, you see the stars, you see the tablets. Because it's now a landmark, they could never change that outside. So when you were walking by this building and you realize it's a Pentecostal church, but it has stars and a tablet on the outside, and you might wonder what's going on, but that's the history. And our tour runs by this building. And in fact, we have a very good relationship with the pastor, and we go into the building as well. Okay, next slide, please. I'm going to have Amanda click on this slide and run the whole thing. And this is Al Myman, one of our community elders, talking about the synagogue where he grew up across the street.
Okay,
go.
so Sephardic Bikur Cholim was in between Herzl and Congregation Ezra B'Sereth and Congregation Ashkenazic Bikur Cholim. And I remember on the holidays especially, I wasn't necessarily inside the synagogue praying where I should have been. I could have been. My father was the assistant chazan, so he didn't have, I was able to sneak out. And that was a place where it was a gathering place for my age, young teens of getting together and chat lashon and having conversations, and we'd walk around and have that aspect of celebrating the holiday outside sticks in my mind as a very clear memory.
So Al is in his 80s, and he and his wife actually are going to make Aliyah around the time of the holidays. So sadly, we're going to lose him as part of our community. He is a wealth of information. And the interesting thing about not only what Al said, but how he said it, if you noticed, he was peppering his language with Ladino. He was talking about a charlashon, which means chit chat, or literally to throw tongue. And that generation, that's how they talk. There's Ladino mixed in with the English, just like, we probably mix a little bit of Yiddish in with our English because it has become part of the English language. Okay, next slide, please.
Okay.
So the other Sephardic synagogue, the one started by the Jews from Rhodes, is Ezra B'Sereth. And here's a picture. Looks very 1920s out on the front steps of the Ezra B'Sereth. Okay, next slide. So from the 1920s to the 1960s, the Jews were all living in a very kind of condensed area of Seattle. Why? Why are they living all together? They were living there because they were redlined into that area. Just like the Black community and the Asian community, the Jewish community was excluded from the majority of the area of Seattle and were redlined into a very small area in our central area. So not so great, except great on the other hand, because it was a very, very tight community. As Al said, people walked the streets. They knew each other. They knew each other's children and kept an eye on them. This community not only had the synagogues and, of course, lots of houses, residential, but there were also businesses. This is one of the markets that really served the Sephardic community. And we're going to just go through a few more slides of some of the other businesses as well, Amanda. This is inside one of the kosher meat markets. There were several of them. Next. Another kosher meat market. Okay, now in the 1960s, the community moved from the central area to an area called Seward Park. It's not clear whether the synagogues moved first or the residents started moving first, but we do know that they left in the 60s because of racial unrest in the area. And so now the Sephardic community is in the Seward Park area, which is about a 20-minute drive from the central area. So this is the Ezra Basereth, built in 1963. Next slide. This is outside their courtyard. This black monument on the left is an exact replica of a monument that sits in Rhodes today, which is a monument to the Jews that were deported to Auschwitz, which we'll get to in a little bit. And next slide. So this is the interior of Congregation Ezra Basereth, and we're going to listen to a very short little snippet of Hazan Ike Azos chanting some blessing in Ladino, which is common in the services that are held at Ezra Basereth. So it sounds like there's a lag in the technology. Amanda, you want to try it one more time and see if it's better? And if not, just stop it and we'll move forward. Okay, that's okay. No worries. We'll move forward. This is the newer Sephardic Bikur Holim, which was also built in Seward Park. Okay, let's move forward. So that gives you kind of an overview of Seattle's Sephardic community. We are the third largest in the United States, behind New York and Los Angeles. But we are the largest that involves Jews from Rhodes and Turkey. And as a result, it's quite funny, but anyone who's Sephardic in Seattle, talk about Jewish geography. It's super intense. I mean, it's like, you know, what is your Sephardic name? And ultimately, I hate to say it, but we're kind of all related. I mean, I have people that I know in Seattle who we've traced back that we're fourth and fifth cousins. And it's great because we're very tight, but it's also a little scary because we're that tight. All right, let me tell you about my family's story. So as I mentioned, my mom was born on the island of Rhodes, and she was born on the island of Rhodes in 1921. Next slide. This is her, Clara Barkey. All right, next slide. So the previous slide that I showed was her whole family. Clara was the oldest of 6 children. And she was honestly never a child. She started writing at age 9 to her Uncle Ralph and Auntie Ray, who lived in Seattle. She had never met them, but she started writing. And this is the first letter that she wrote, and it was written in Ladino. And you can see Rhody, 24th of March, 1930. Before I tell you a little bit more about what these letters said and why they're important, let me tell you why we have them, because that's always a question that comes up. So when my mom, when I was growing up, we heard the story that the family came from Rhodes. My mother wrote to her uncle in Seattle, and he brought them here. End of story. Okay, that's it. Positive ending. End of story. So after my mother passed away in 1991, and her uncle and auntie also passed away, their children were cleaning out the house, and they found a box or 2 or 3 filled with many, many documents, including letters written in Ladino and a lot of other documents. And they saw it, they had my mother's name on them. And so they didn't know what to do with them. They gave them to my dad. And my dad was the type that never threw anything away. And so he could not read Ladino, but my mother's brother in Los Angeles was a linguist. And so my dad sent them to him. This was 1994. And he translated them and he typed them, because this was before we all had email and access to the internet. He typed out the translations and he sent them back to my dad. And my dad compiled them. And I happened to be on maternity leave in 1994. And one day he came over with these notebooks full of letters. And he said, "You're the writer, do something with them." And so that's how we know of this incredible story of how my mom and her family came to Seattle. Okay, let's go to the next letter, or the next slide. So there they are in Rhodes. And so my mother is in the top row on the far right with the white skirt. And she's next to her parents, and then her mother's sister on the far left. And then there are her 4 siblings down below, and her middle sister is missing from this photograph for some reason. All right, next slide. So this is Ralph Capilouto. This is the uncle that she wrote to in Seattle. So Ralph actually came to the United States in 1920. So it was before my mom was even born. And he came to New York, and he worked as a window washer. And he happened to be working on a building one day, and someone motioned to him, come down and help me. And so he went down to help, and the guy was working on a sewing machine and he needed help, and Ralph helped him. And it turns out Ralph was pretty good at that type of work. So he got promoted from a window washer to kind of a machinist in the garment district. And he actually worked for a bra company. I think it was probably Maidenform Bras. And so he spent 10 years in New York. And in 1930, he was going to go back to Rhodes. They had an arranged marriage for him. He was going to go to Rhodes and get married and perhaps bring his bride back to the United States. But at this point, Ralph's sister had made her way to Seattle. And when she found out he was going back to Rhodes, she said, no, Ralph, why don't you come to Seattle first? And so he came to Seattle to visit her before going back to Rhodes. And in Seattle, the sister fixed him up with someone else. And that's why he ended up staying in Seattle. Next slide, please. She ended up marrying a woman named Rachel Al-Hadaf, and she was born in Rhodes, but came to Seattle very early and went to business school. And they got married, and Rachel and Ralph said, what are we going to do to make a living? And it turns out that there was no place to buy ready-made curtains in Seattle. If you needed curtains, you would have to order them from New York. And so they decided there was a business here. So they created, based on Rachel's business acumen and Ralph's skills with machinery, they created Seattle Curtain Manufacturing Company, and they were very successful. This is some pictures from the factory. Next, please. Okay, so we have Ralph in Seattle, and we have Claire in Rhodes writing to him. And Claire was super persistent. And so these letters started off kind of like everyday commentary. I went to school, I came home, I helped Mama. We're worried about Auntie Esther, who doesn't have someone to marry. She's going to be an old maid. Claire got sick with meningitis. She talked about that. So kind of everyday letters until about 1936, 1937. Now remember, Rhodes was under Italian possession, and it was under the government of dictator Mussolini. And this is a picture of him. All right, next slide. And Mussolini, as we know, allied with Adolf Hitler, which was very bad for the Jews in Rhodes under Italian possession. Next slide. All right. So just like they were establishing anti-Jewish laws throughout Europe, they did in Italy, and this applied to the Jews of Rhodes as well. So no kosher meat, The Jews could not go to school. They could not have a business. They were really suffering as a result of these anti-Jewish laws. And then on top of that, in 1939, there came an edict from Italy that said, if you were not an Italian citizen, you had to leave. All right, so this ended up applying to my mom's family because her father was from Turkey and he had not gotten Italian citizenship. So he was forced to leave the country. And the question was, would he leave on his own or would he take the family with him? And they decided to go together. There was no place for them to go easily. They wanted to come to the United States. The US would not let them in. There were two choices, Tangier, Morocco, or Shanghai, China. And they decided to go to Tangier, and they had to send a lot of money. And Claire was writing to Ralph, we need money, please send money now. Otherwise, we don't know what's going to happen. And this was a telegram written in Ladino begging for money. Next slide, please. And luckily, he sent money in time. They were able to take a ship and sail from Rhodes to Tangier. Okay, at the time, that was considered horrible. They were refugees in Tangier. They couldn't get to the United States. And this is a picture of the family in Tangier in 1947. Next slide, please. Okay, but really for this family, it was a blessing that they got kicked out because they had many family members and many, many community members who stayed in Rhodes who were not kicked out. And in July of 1944, the Nazis came in and they deported the entire remaining Jewish community of 1,500 Jews to Auschwitz. Now, Rhodes, most people don't know this. Rhodes was the last Jewish community to be deported and the furthest from Auschwitz. So there were 1,500 Jews that were deported. Only 151 survived. All right, next slide, please. At the Kahal Shalom Synagogue in Rhodes, there's a plaque. It's written in French that lists all of the family members, all the names of the family members who died in Auschwitz. And of course, I have family members here. So it's basically my mother's aunts and cousins who stayed on Rhodes. All right, next slide, please. So meanwhile, what was going on between Ralph and the Barkey family that was in Tangier? They still had to get from Tangier to the United States. So Ralph was doing everything he could do in Seattle to bring them here. He ultimately had to enlist the help of the U.S. representative from Seattle, Hugh DeLacy was his name, and the State Department. And this is a letter from the State Department saying that we need you to come to Washington, D.C. and testify. So Ralph and his wife, Rachel, they took a train from Seattle to DC. It took about a week so that they could testify before a State Department committee to claim that they could support this family of 9 that was trying to get to the United States. Okay, next slide, please. Yes, more letters from Seattle Curtain Manufacturing Company trying to get the family here. Next slide. And finally, the family learned that they got visas, 1946. So this is letting Ralph know, possible arrival, Marquis Comia, May 12th, New York. And the family came in 3 different groups. There was brother Jack and Aunt Esther. Then there was my mother, her sisters, her mother, and then there were the twins that came later. Next slide, please. Okay, another telegram explaining where they would be. Next slide. There's my mother's passport, 1944, but they came in 1946. Next slide. This is the manifest from the ship that they were on. Next slide. And here's a picture of them coming to Seattle, and the Seattle Times did a story on them. Group from Rhodes, happy in 7 languages. But you'll see that there's one person missing from this photo, and that is my mother's father. He wasn't allowed to come because, remember, he was from Turkey, and the number of Turkish visas compared to the number of Italian visas was even smaller. They were only allowing 100 immigrants from Turkey that year. So he ended up staying in Tangier an extra 3 years before he finally got permission to come to the United States. All right, next slide. All right, so there they are, united with Ralph and Rachel Capilouto and their children, people who they had never met before, but they were all very happy to be together. Next slide. Okay, I'm keeping an eye on the program, and it looks like we're pretty much on schedule. So that's a brief overview of my mom's family story, and it's written in a book, A Hug from Afar. If anyone wants more details, it's very detailed. There's a lot of primary source documents there. The foreword also compares my mom to Anne Frank because she was writing these letters the same time that Anne Frank was. And Anne Frank's family was desperately trying to get visas as well. And sadly, they did not get them. And we know what happened. So my mom's family was extremely lucky to get the visas when they did. All right, we're going to end this with a little bit of upbeat. We're going to talk about Sephardic food and then end with a couple of musical numbers. So let's talk Sephardic food. So Sephardic food is a blend of every country that the Jews went to after they fled Rhodes, or sorry, fled Spain. So we have foods that have history in Spain, foods that have history in Turkey. And right here, we're making boyos or bulemas. They're made with spinach, and the synagogues, the ladies' auxiliaries in the synagogues meet every week, and they make these items, which are wonderful. Next slide. They're making these boyos. They have a dough. They roll it out. They fill it with spinach and cheese. Next. That's what they look like on the right. Lots of cheese. And these would be similar to something that you might get in Turkey. All right, next slide. Yapraks, also known as dolmas. Again, you might see these in Greece or Turkey. Grape leaves stuffed with rice and pine nuts. Next slide. Here they are baking at one of the synagogues. These are bizcochos. If you're in any Spanish-speaking country, you'll have bizcochos. Most of them have lard in them. Ours do not, but basically a very simple cookie. All right, next. There's a close-up of the bizcocho. Next. Here we have borrecas, very similar to a Spanish empanada, basically a piece of pastry dough that is stuffed with something. Our favorite thing to stuff them with is potato and cheese. So it's carbs on carbs. They're phenomenal. Or we can also stuff them with eggplant. And around, let's see, I guess it would be Rosh Hashanah. And also Purim, we might stuff them with pumpkin, and they're like little pumpkin pies. All right, next. Then we have lots of sweets. You'll see the baklava, which is very common in the Middle Eastern countries. Mostachados on the right, which is kind of the filling of the baklava held together, dusted with powdered sugar. Next. That's the inside of a mostachado. And then dulces, which are basically fruit that is boiled in a simple syrup and very sweet. It's a tradition when you go to a Sephardic home, at least in the olden days, where you would serve somebody a piece of this candied fruit and a spoon and some water. Next slide. And we bake as a community. So on the right is a group from one of the synagogues baking together. And on the left is myself and my girlfriends baking for the wedding of one of her daughters. All right, next. We also bake with the students at Hillel UW. We do baking classes, Sephardic baking classes for them every single year, and they are very, very popular. All right, next. Here we are at my house baking borrecas. Next. All right, and I'm going to play for you 2 pieces of Sephardic music, and we might be over by a minute. Or actually, you know what? Let's do a taste of the first one and then the full second one. The first one, next slide. This is an ode to raki. Raki is the same as ouzo or arak. It is an anise liquor, and we Sephardic Jews love it. So Amanda, if you can let this go for maybe, I don't know, a minute, and then we'll go to the next song.
Okay, I'm gonna need to pause for a sec because it's gonna take me to YouTube, so it's gonna have to be a different screen share. So just give me a moment.
Sorry about that.
Puedo yo dejarlo de verlo a ti de tanto amor. Cuando está en el barrio, adentro, cuando me da yo también hago baños de hielo, todo por él, pero aquí me muero, pero no me da de tanto amar. Me siento yo y yo varón, me siento yo primario, sin tener líos al cacho. Me siento millonario, habitado por el raquí. Puedo yo dejarlo partir de tanto amor.
Okay, so that was a song written and sung in Ladino. It is For the Love of Raki. And there were 2 rabbis in that video dancing and celebrating Raki. All right, I have one more video to show you, another song, but I want to ask for feedback. Is it worth trying, or should we just go straight to Q&A here? Because I want to make sure that it's high quality. It's a lovely song, but if it's not going to play well, then we can skip it.
We can also send out the links to the videos, to these 2 videos from the end in the follow-up email.
Okay. And is it herky-jerky on your end too, Amanda?
It looks okay on my end. The audio is just quite low.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to, you know what, let's try it. And if it's not working, then just stop it and we'll go straight to Q&A.
Sure.
Okay. This song, by the way, it's beautiful. It's women singing, and it is an ode to berenjenas, which are eggplants. 7 ways to make eggplants.
Si de modos de guisados se guisar la berenjena, la primera que la guisa es la baba Helena, se la hace boca asiáticos la meten a cena. Esta comida la llaman comida de berenjena. Ay, mi tío será así, que le agrada beber vino. Con el vino, 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 mucho y bien, ay, el vino. La segunda que la guisa es la mujer de Samás, la cavaca por adentro y la riche de Roma. Esta comida la llaman la comida la dolma. Esta comida la llaman la comida la dolma. Ay, mi tío será así, que le agrada beber vino. Con el vino, 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 mucho y bien, ay, el vino. La trasera que la guisa es mi primister dichote, la cavaca por adentro y la gente da romote. Esa comida la llaman la comida la mondrote. Esta comida la llaman la comida la mondrote. Ay, mi tío será así, que le agrada beber vino. Con el vino, 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 mucho y bien, ay, el vino. La bornilla es aburrida en color y en color. Dejaremos una cena, nos gozaremos los dos. Antes que venga el gusano y le quite la sabor. Antes que venga el gusano y le quite la sabor. Ay, mi.
Okay, that is like one of my favorite Ladino songs, and it sticks in my head. I'm probably going to be singing it all night tonight. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you guys again for inviting me and hearing me out and learning a little bit about the Sephardic community in Seattle. I am available to take questions if there are any.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay. My name is Sharon Tanner. My last name, my name at birth was Hanyu, but they pronounced it Hanyu. My uncle changed it. It was Kohunyu, and we're on the wall in Rhodes. And my question was, do you have any relatives that live in LA area?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the uncle that translated the letters, his name was Maury Barkey, B-A-R-K-E-Y. He was very active in the Moroccan synagogue there because his wife, Flory Barkey, is Moroccan, and he passed away right before COVID, but he has 4 children who live in Los Angeles.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah,
and
because
by the way, did you say Junio with an O or a U?
Junio. I live in Aliso Viejo, California.
Well, somehow you'll have to look up the family or contact me individually, and I can send you some more information.
Oh, yeah. And I know a lot of my relatives and everything. And we had belonged to the Sephardic Hebrew Center in LA. And then it merged with Tiferet Israel.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you participated today.
Yes, I've been looking forward to this a lot. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Cynthia, I see that Margie Meadow has her hand up. Margie, can you unmute and ask your question?
I am unmuted.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think I put in the chat that years ago, and I'm talking maybe 40 years ago because I'm that old. I had a friend whose family left Spain, went to Rhodes, from Rhodes went to Zaire. They became Malachite miners in Zaire, or not miners, but they created and he spoke French, but he held an Italian passport. And so it always fascinated me how the family went from, and would tell me this story, and he took me to a Sephardic Seder at a home of, the woman was Turkish and the husband was Belgian. And so, and the children, and they spoke French, and my French wasn't all that good, but the kids sat next to me and they helped a lot. But it was just, the food was different. I had never been to a Sephardic Seder with the dates and everything. So I want to thank you, because this brings back such memories, and I wish I could remember his name, but I don't.
So thank you for mentioning that. So a lot of the Jews from Rhodes who didn't come to the United States, they did go to Africa, and they went to the Belgian Congo.
And that was Zaire.
Became Zaire. So because of that connection between Belgium and Africa, that's why they would have spoken French there. And I had relatives who went to Africa and then ended up in Belgium or ended up in Italy. And then the other thing I should have mentioned is that the Jews of Rhodes spoke a lot of languages. So they spoke Ladino in the home. They spoke Italian in the streets because it was, again, an Italian possession. They spoke French in the schools because they went to the French Alliance schools. And then they would speak a little bit of Greek, perhaps a little bit of Turkish, some Hebrew. So my mother was fluent in, and then of course, when they came here to the United States, English, she was fluent in 5 languages. And when you learn so many languages that young, you're just open to learning languages. And I think it became easy for them to continue to pick up more and more of them. There's also a large Sephardic community in South Africa, in Cape Town.
There's a question that someone asked, I think it's Clarion Silver. Is there a Rhodes community cookbook? Is it available to purchase?
So there are several Sephardic cookbooks. The one that I recommend, because it is absolutely gorgeous, it's by a woman named Stella Hannon Cohen. Stella, look it up. You can get it on Amazon. I believe it's Stella Hannon Cohen or just Stella Cohen. She actually lives in Zimbabwe. And the cookbook is beautiful. It's incredibly illustrated with her photographs, and she's still alive. And that's the one that I would recommend purchasing.
There's another question, Greta Spear. How do I go about connecting with a tour of Sephardic Seattle? We have good friends in Seattle, and I know we will be visiting them.
Okay, yes. So 2 ways to keep on top of what we're doing here in Seattle. I encourage you to go to our website, seattlesephardic.network.org, and sign up for our newsletter. We send it out once a month. That's it. And it basically tells you of activities, and it will include the tour. If you're on Facebook, you can also join our Facebook group. It is a private group, and we're actually running a promotion right now. We just started today. We have 999 members. And for to get over 1,000, I posted today that anyone who asks to join the group, we have to approve you. I'm going to keep track over the next 2 days, and we will draw a winner, and they will not only be admitted to the Facebook group, but we're going to send them a dozen bizcochos. So I encourage all of you to do that so we can get up over 1,000. But we post very often about what's happening in the community and also news articles of interest to the community.
All right, tell us again what to sign up for. I'm in there right now.
SeattleSephardicNetwork.org. You'll see the opportunity to join the newsletter somewhere on the bottom. It says join our newsletter. And then if you go to Facebook, the Seattle Sephardic Network Facebook group, not the page, but the group, where you have to ask to join, and then I approve you.
Okay.
The security thing.
Sharon Tanner wrote, my aunt wrote a book called I Remember Rhodes.
Rebecca Levy.
I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting. You know, I think because Rhodes was an island and it's easy to see the borders, people who have a connection to Rhodes are still very connected. Where on the other hand, if you were born in Poland, let's say, the borders may have changed between Poland and Russia and Ukraine, and it's harder to know exactly where you're from, so it's harder to go back. But for Rhodes, an island, it was contained, and then people go to visit because it's a very beautiful place to visit.
Somebody said something about there's a cookbook that's called Stella's Cookbook.
That's the one.
That's the one, and it is on Amazon, and they put it in as Mediterranean Sephardic table recipes, Mediterranean. Okay, let me see if there's anything else. Give me 1 second. I think they're all going on the website, which is great.
Yeah, we shared out the links to the cookbook as well as the Seattle Sephardic Network website, so folks can sign up at the bottom of that page for the newsletter, and then the link to the Facebook group as well, where they can request to join. And Sherry shared out about the Rhodes Jewish Museum as well for that book.
Excellent. I'm just going to offer one more plug. One thing that we try to do in Seattle is we try to get, I'm going to say a word and I don't mean it to be offensive, but I think it's a fair word. And that is Ashkenormative. And I'm not sure everyone has heard it or not, but it basically is just like there's whitewashing of culture. We as Sephardic Jews feel that most people think of Jews kind of under the Ashkenazic construct. And that's great. I mean, I'm half Ashkenazic, but we're trying to encourage our organizations in Seattle to recognize that not everybody is Ashkenazic and not every Jewish tradition is Ashkenazic, and to try to include some Sephardic culture in some of the traditions, whether that is some food, whether that is the pronunciation of the Hebrew in certain cases, whether it's including some Ladino language pieces, or just a little bit of history, just to kind of broaden everybody's view that the Jewish community is not just, they didn't come from just one place, that it's much broader than that. So that's my little pitch to everyone who's a member of WRJ.
Thank you so much, Cynthia.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I'm Sandy Purcell, and I sit on the board of directors, and I also I'm the chair of the program committee, and I identify with she. I want to tell you how much I thank Gina Newhouse for bringing this program to us, but Cynthia Flash, you were amazing, and it was interesting and educational, and enriched our understanding of those cultures that you had. But the pictures and the photographs, I don't know how you kept all of them. The newspaper articles, it was phenomenal. And we're so happy that so many of you attended. I hope you were as inspired and found it extremely interesting. On the screen, you will notice that there's upcoming programs. The one that we're very excited about is September the 8th at 8 o'clock. It's the Rosenwald, the remarkable story of the Jewish partnership with the African American communities. And there's going to be a panel discussion, and it'll be really interesting. October 20th, Sherry Robbins, who is our amazing WRJ tour guide, is going to put together this amazing program on October the 20th at 12 o'clock. notice that there is a time change between Israel and us, so it's got to be at 12 o'clock, no later in the afternoon. November the 12th at 8 o'clock is a savory pie baking, just in time for Thanksgiving. And Cheryl Barenberg will be giving you the link for that soon. And of course, don't forget April the 12th, 2026 for the WRJ Day of Action, where we're all going to be doing some type of social justice action to improve our world, basically. And so it could be a little mitzvah or it can be a large one. So the way you go online, the way you get these programs is to go online through Mighty Networks, and they'll give you an update of all the upcoming WRJ programs. And I want to thank everybody once again for attending, and most of all to Gina and Cynthia for an amazing program. Thank you so much. Oh, and Amanda put in the chat the registration for the Rosenwald program. So if you want to go ahead and register now, that should prove to be an important and wonderful program too. So there's a quick survey in the chat that you can click on so that we have some idea as to whether you benefited or enjoyed the program tonight. And thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.